In this video, I'm going to walk you through a standard GMAT study plan that centers around the GMAT official guide, the big guide, and it should take you anywhere between 2 to 5 months to complete. And the reason that the range seems kind of wide is that the preparation really depends on two factors. Number one, your starting point. By that I mean the score that you achieve on your first mock test or the last test that you've just done. And this starting point, it depends on a variety of factors, and I talk about them in a different video. So that was factor number one, your starting point. And the second factor is the number of hours that you plan to dedicate per week to study. And in this video, I'm going to explain how these two factors affect your preparation time by discussing GMAT Buddy's core preparation plan that centers around this big GMAT official guide on this Google sheet that you see in front of you over here. Whenever I talk about mock tests, I'm talking about the official GMAT mock tests, which you really have to use with a lot of caution, and I will tell you how to use them in this video. Now, what I want to say is, when you're thinking about study hours per week, I want you to remember that if you increase the amount of hours you study per week, you cannot expect an equivalent amount of change or improvement in your score or performance. For example, if you decide that you can dedicate 10 to 15 hours per week to prepare, which is a lot if you have a full-time job, and that is going to allow you to complete the GMAT study plan in, let's say, 5 months. If you decide to spend 30 hours per week, it does not mean that you're going to get the same results in half the amount of time. So it doesn't really work that way, because the nature of the thing that you're trying to do is related to high performance regarding skills that are really very innate, and therefore any kind of a meaningful change requires a lot of time, and there's a limit to how far you can push to increase the return. So for example, if you think that you need to commit to an exercise routine that is going to the gym 5 times a week, and you're going to achieve certain results, you cannot expect double the results if you double the amount of time that you go to the gym. There's injury, there's fatigue, and there's just a limit to what your body can process. So this is really very, very similar. That is why it's extremely important that you begin your GMAT preparation at a time where your life is in order. So if there's a lot of stress in your life, you're changing jobs, you're getting married, you're having kids, it becomes really difficult to commit. So you have to make sure that your life is in order, and if you have a partner, that they're on board with your preparation, especially if it's going to take you a lot of time and a lot of effort. So following along, I'm going to start by describing the main milestones that you have to complete. And whenever the opportunity presents itself, I'm going to say how much time you need to put in, and based on those two factors that I mentioned earlier. But first, let me talk to you about this Google sheet that you see in front of you over here. You see a few tabs. There's topic PS, which is problem solving, the topics in problem solving, the math really, topics and data sufficiency, so the same kinds of topics. And as you know, in the new GMAT, data sufficiency now falls under data insights, but there are still some questions designated as data sufficiency in a separate section in the official guide. And that is an error log for those questions. And there's reading comprehension, critical reasoning, a summary. If you see over here, it's a balance sheet of your performance as you solve through the official guide. It serves kind of as an error log. And it allows you to quickly see, and allows me, if I'm coaching you, to quickly identify some problem areas. And over here you see sessions, and this over here shows you all these sessions that you have to go through, whether they're reviewing concepts online or going through the GMAT questions in the big official guide. And these are the reading comprehension texts over here. And then there's a section called modules, which I talk about in a different video, but it's basically the different kinds of modules that we use as you prepare, and sometimes different modules are required, and that is based on your starting point and your objective. And I'll start by talking about a few points of caution. Reviewing is a really very big part of preparation. As you can see over here, I have it in uppercase. It's vital. And that is also an area where a lot of people they commit a lot of errors in preparation, where they think about the number of problems they have to solve, and then they just solve them under time, and they think that they're done. Instead, what you should understand is that reviewing is an essential part of preparation. And if you look over here in this little table and look at this as a general guideline, right? Obviously it's not going to be precise, but it's a very helpful guideline. Where you are as far as your score is concerned dictates how much time you have to spend reviewing problems. Obviously, if you're already really good, you don't need to spend a lot of time reviewing, because you already know a lot of the concepts, many strategies, or if you learn a strategy, you should be able to apply it really very quickly, because you already have the basics and the foundation that allows you to apply immediately. But if you're starting off from a lower score, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time preparing. And a general guideline is, if you need 20 minutes to review when you're scoring already very close to the 90th percentile, the amount of time that you need to review when you're not as advanced, is at least 3 times. And that is a really very important point. And that's related to what I was saying earlier in the video, where you cannot expect a linear return on your effort when you're preparing, because the amount of things and the amount of activities that you need to commit to, they don't add up linearly, but they add up in a very, I'd say, I don't want to say exponential form, but like the effect is multiplicative. So if you need twice as much time to review, you need twice as much time to learn concepts, it means like your overall preparation time should grow by at least a factor of 4. That is why it's very important that you understand what your starting point is and where you need to be, okay? And the deadline that you have. So reviewing is an essential part of preparation. And if in the study plan I ask you to solve 10 problems under time conditions, and you do it, and let's say you're over here, you're around this range, and it takes you 20 minutes to solve these questions, you should expect about 40 minutes of review. Maybe it's a little bit less sometimes, maybe it's a little more. The point is that you have to immediately review. Don't solve them in the evening and then review 3 days later on a different morning. It's not good. You need to be aware of what you were doing and why you were doing it when you're reviewing, to understand the reason behind your mistakes. So if you leave it for a few days, you're not going to remember what you did. So you have to review in the same session the questions that you solve. And then you have to set at least 2 hours of review per week to recap everything that you've done through the week. So for example, if you say that I'm going to study 10 hours per week, 2 of those hours need to be for reviewing. And every 3 weeks, set maybe 4 days to a week to recap everything that you've done in the past 3 weeks. So you could say that every 3 weeks of new content, of new material, of new questions, which included all the review that I talk about, right? This ratio of every 10 hours to have to be review, you're going to have to spend about a week, maybe a little less, reviewing all the material that you've done. And the reason is that you have to access all these new ideas that you learn and new concepts, strategies, etc. You have to access them multiple times in order that you are able to use them or to summon them when you're solving real-time conditions. So obviously, if you're, as I say, over here, it means you already know a lot of the concepts and you've learned them, and more importantly, you've mastered them a long time ago. So if you review the concept once or twice, perhaps that's enough for you to be able to use it. If you learn a strategy, perhaps it's enough for you to be able to use it immediately under time conditions. And so you can see that change, or that the benefit of that activity that you've committed to. But if you're starting off from a very low score, or an average score, or less than an average score, you're gonna have to revisit that concept or that strategy or that hack a lot of times before you are able to actually use it under time conditions. And I can't really give you a formula where it says you have to repeat it this number of times before you're able to use it on the exam. So, but the point is that I'm trying to say is that further away you are from your target score, the more you have to do a lot of review. And I want to also highlight the following. You have to repeat the guide between at least 1 to 2 times. So just solving it once is not enough. And I guarantee you that if you've already solved it once and you go through it again, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm willing to bet in a lot of the same places where you've already made those mistakes. And the reason is that it's kind of like a personality test. And the way you solve problems is based on your solving personality. And those questions are designed to test you based on your level of mastery. And so if you have any weakness, that weakness is going to be illustrated at a certain point in the problem. And unless you change, you're going to face that same problem in the same way, and that weakness will make you get it incorrect again. So you have to solve the guide at least 1 to 2 times to identify your weaknesses and change them. So I'll talk about how you actually do that. But the point here is that because there's a lot of repetition, it's very easy to get bored. And as you prepare, and let's say you have to prepare for 6 months to a year, it can be extremely tedious. So if you like the good things in life, this is going to really make you suffer. So you have to be committed, and you have to be ready to put in the time and to really put in the effort to see the change that you want. First point is to understand where you are, which is an official GMAT mock test. Now, you don't want to delay this process for a very long time because you need to understand what your starting point is. Some candidates, they like to delay this because they're afraid of bad news. Sometimes it's a matter of ego. They want that first score to be really high. It doesn't really help you because you need to understand where you are. You need to understand your strengths. You need to understand your weaknesses in order that you create the best possible plan for the deadline that you have. So you don't want to waste time. But obviously you want to familiarize yourself with the content because you don't want to start a mock test and then try to figure out what you have to do or try to figure out the time. So week 1, I recommend that you spend maybe no more than a week or 10 days in this process where you understand what the GMAT is, what the sections are, the different question types, familiarize yourself with the content, and then take a few practice questions online to understand problem solving, data sufficiency, data insights, the different question types, reading comprehension, critical reasoning, get a sense of how much time you need to spend on questions, understand the interface, and then take that mock test. Now, I guarantee you that when you're taking that first mock test, you're going to want to quit halfway through. You're going to tell yourself, wait. I had a bad start. This is not good. I'm going to do this next weekend when I'm feeling better. I'm feeling a little tired now. Don't. It's better not even to start the mock test unless you're ready to finish it. So a lot of candidates do that. I will confess, I did it the first time many years ago when I started the GMAT. I started the mock test. I didn't like how it was going, so I quit. Don't do this because it really won't make a difference. So you really need to actually also test yourself and improve your mental toughness. If you're going to start something, you're going to finish it. So make sure you don't quit the mock test when you start it. Make sure you keep good time. Hard questions, let them go. All right. So these are all kinds of things that you try to figure out in that first week as far as question types are concerned and when to guess and when to try, etc. 1 week to 10 days, make sure you finish the mock test, enter an answer for all questions. And so that's going to give you a baseline of how much time you need to prepare. And as I said over here, if you look at this table that I show you, if your score is close or approaching already the 90th percentile, some people can do it because they've already mastered those concepts in different context. I talk about this in a different video. It may take you about 8 weeks to finish this plan. If you're really under a lot of pressure, maybe a little bit less. If you're that kind of candidate, maybe a boot camp would work. But if you're not that kind of candidate, which the vast majority are, you're going to have to take more time. And generally speaking, if you're here, if you're scoring maybe around the average, a little bit more than the average score, perhaps this plan is going to take you 3 months, 4 months, approaching 5 months. And if you're scoring here, it's going to take you at least 5 months to go through this content for reasons that I described earlier, because it requires a lot of review. You're going to have to go back and revisit concepts. And if you score less than this, then this is not the time for you to start using the GMAT official material. So over here, some guidelines that allow you to understand when is a good time for you to use the official guide. If you have a good level of algebra and arithmetic, your reading comprehension is decent, you have some experience with problem solving, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you can be to some certain extent autonomous as you're solving problems. If you find that you always have to look at solutions or you always have to look for guidance for the vast majority of questions, this means that you're not ready to use the official material. And that is going to be reflected in that first mock test score. Or maybe you're someone who's been trying really hard, you took a lot of courses and you're thinking, it's just not working. I keep studying, I solve all the problems, but my score doesn't change. It means that there are fundamentals that you haven't not necessarily mastered, but you're not good enough at, that to allow you to be autonomous as you solve these problems. So that's really important. So if you're in that bracket, there are other things that you have to do before you even begin to use the official guide, which I talk about in a different video. And if you're in that situation, you can feel free to reach out and ask me. I'll tell you what you have to do. So you do that first mock test, you understand where you are, and then you begin to review the concepts, right? So these are the concepts, the syllabus that they test on the GMAT. It's not a lot of concepts, but you have to know them really well. And as I said earlier, if you're already really good, it's going to be easy for you to review them. You'll learn some new things. You'll know a lot of things. Perhaps they'll be described in a different way. So you watch these videos on my platform, you apply on some questions, and this should take you anywhere between 2 to maybe 6 weeks to review based again on what I had already said, which is your starting point. Now, once you do that, you begin to solve in the official guide. And in this first phase, maybe for the first 1 or 2 weeks, I recommend that you solve questions under time conditions. On average, you have to solve each question, well, on average 2 minutes. So meaning a little more than 2, a little less than 2. But if you're solving 10 questions, you should spend 20 minutes. But maybe in the first week, it's okay to spend a little more. And the idea is to experience the pressure of time, the requirement of time, but to give yourself some time to acclimatize to this stressful situation where you have to solve under time conditions. And I suggest that you first pass. You know how I told you have to solve the official guide at least maybe 1.5 or 2 times. Obviously, I don't mean solve it once from page 1 to page 1000 and then again. But as you solve them under time based on the topic or concept, and then again online, and then review, etc. The effect, or towards the end of the preparation, you would have actually solved it about at least 1 or 1.5 times. So when you start solving them, you solve by topic. I'm talking about the quant over here. You solve them by topic, and if you look over here, this error log organizes all the questions in the official guide by topic. So you have properties of numbers, exponents, ratio, percents, etc. You solve them by topic in order, right? As you can see, they're ordered, and you enter your answers into this error log. And so this saves you a lot of time because it shows you what is right and what is wrong. So for example, this is just putting in random answers. It tells you what is right and what is wrong. And as you solve that, this summary over here updates your performance. So if after week 3 you want to look at an overall picture of what you've done, you look at this and you say, like, that's what I've done, this is my weakness, this is what I have to do, etc. It allows me to look at your performance. And over here, the convenience of this is that you don't have to check at the end of the guide, but then you can also view the video solution that will be on the platform. And you don't have to do this for every single question, but I do recommend that you review the solutions of someone who's an advanced performer, because a lot of these solutions in the official guide are not really convenient. It's usually a very tedious solution, perhaps written down by an intern, I don't really know. But it's not a solution that allows you to review not only concepts, but strategies in a very convenient manner. And that's why I tell you that where you start really determines how long you have to spend to prepare, because if you're making a lot of errors, you have to do a lot of review. But if you're not making a lot of errors, maybe you have to only review a few solutions. So you solve these questions by topic, and as you solve, you review your errors. But in that first pass, as you solve questions by topic, only solve easy, medium problems. I know you're going to be very excited, you want to solve difficult problems, but my recommendation is to first solve easy, medium problems, to learn how to apply the concepts that you learn within the context of a GMAT question. Now, do this for problem solving, do this for data sufficiency. However, in reading comprehension, you're going to have to go in order. You enter your answer, you check your answers, you learn from your errors. But in critical reasoning, you can solve them by topic. They're organized into a topic, and you can go in order. Also, only solve easy, medium. And the idea is to learn strategy, identify your weaknesses, familiarize yourself with the content, and develop some experience before you tackle the difficult problems. And obviously, always under timed conditions. Now that you've watched all the concept videos, you solved the easy, medium problems by topic from the guide. So as I say, this takes about anywhere from maybe 4 weeks to about 8 weeks based on your starting point. Now is a good time to solve the difficult questions. But first, you'll take some time, maybe a week, 3-4 days, to recap everything that you've done, maybe a little more if you have to. Review your mistakes. You have to be very patient. Now you're going to have this urgency to finish and do more, but I really advise you to review questions that you answered incorrectly, watch some concepts again, because you really have to revisit those ideas more than once in order that you're able to apply on new questions. So now that you've done that, I recommend that you solve the difficult problems from the guide by topic, again, under timed conditions. This takes anywhere from, I'd say, 2 weeks to perhaps a month. And then once you do that, access your guide on MBA.com. So this is the view for the access to the guide online. You have to remember that it does not give you the actual pages of the guide that you can just flick through the pages. It's just a question bank of the questions that are in the guide and some extra questions. And now would also be the moment to begin to solve data insights questions. Now, the reason that I don't recommend that you start by solving data insights questions as you are learning the content and the material and solving problem solving data sufficiency is that it's better to maybe acquire the content, understand the concepts, learn some strategies, and then use those strategies as well on the data insights questions, because there aren't so many data insight questions. Because it's a relatively speaking new section, there isn't much content, so you want to use that content when you're ready and you don't want to waste it. That way you can extract the most value that you can out of it. Now you can go here, once you log in, you'll have this official starter kit where you can familiarize yourself with the content for the first week or 10 days and then take the official mock test. And this is actually what you will see when you've accessed your guide online. So you click on study and you'll go here. So once you're here, you'll see this dashboard. And what you want to do is click on practice questions. Once you're over here, you click on start new session. Now when you access the guide, you're not going to see this because you may have not started. So when it's a fresh start, this is going to be empty. And then you click on start new session and you'll see these are all the remaining questions. And what you can do is you can choose type, difficulty, and number of questions. And as you can see over here, there's data insights, all the different question types. So these are going to be for data sufficiency. These are going to be the questions that are in the guide. And these are online exclusive, so you'll only be able to access them when you access the guide online. There aren't many. And these are the different question types. Then here's the quantitative review, problem solving, online exclusive. Now, the problem with this is that you can only choose the difficulty of the questions you want to solve. You can't choose the type, and that's the value of using the error log. Now, maybe you're running out of time, or you feel that you're confident with the material, so perhaps at this phase, you don't want to solve all the problem-solving questions. You only want to solve the medium and difficult problems. In that case, it's going to take you less time. So if you decide for this segment of the preparation to only solve medium and hard, and I'm not counting the data insights questions, so if I put this at 0 over here, and you're going to see the number of questions available, and that will give you you'll be able to estimate the amount of time that this phase, and it's a very important phase, I think, going to take. So I'm going to just set these to 0 for now. And if you look, there are about 400 questions of medium difficulty for quant and verbal, not counting data insights. And that should take you about maybe 2 weeks to finish. And the purpose over here is to, again, go through these questions again under time conditions, now in a group of different questions. So it's not just one topic, it's all topics and different difficulties. Obviously, you want to do, I recommend that you do quant alone and verbal alone. Don't mix the questions in one time set. And so what's the value of this is that you're going to experience the questions on a different interface mixed with other questions. And so there's an element of newness that presents an extra challenge. So you may look at a question and think, I kind of remember this. Maybe you know the answer is C, but if you can't prove that it's answer choice C, then you don't choose C. And so that is an opportunity for you to rehearse time management and to recap those questions again. And then to work on data insights, what I recommend is that you work on one question type only, and to perhaps start with easy and medium. I'm not talking about data sufficiency because you're already experienced with data sufficiency by now. When you look at multi-source reasoning, table analysis, graphics interpretation, and the two-part analysis, I do recommend that you solve them on a type-by-type basis. And you can start off maybe with easy, medium, and then work yourself towards hard. Assign, I think, maybe 20 minutes max per session, because it's just very dense, there's a lot of material, and you won't get too many questions of that one type in the data insights section. My only advice is that when you're solving multi-source reasoning, do not select the difficulty. Because if you decide, for example, to say, I'm going to solve 3 multi-source reasoning questions that are easy, or 10, for example, what will happen is that the interface may give you that table or those tabs of information that you have to read for those questions, and then as soon as you solve one question, it just switches to another set of tabs, and so you kind of waste that information. So in that case, and it's kind of like reading comprehension, you have a set of tabs with the corresponding questions. So my recommendation when you want to do multi-source reasoning is to just select all of the questions and designate 20 minutes to solve 2 sets of questions. So the tabs and their questions, and when you've done that, you just stop. So as you see over here, there aren't a lot of questions, and that is why I recommend that you leave data insights for this phase. Now, there are a lot of ways that GMAT prep can go. It's not always something that is easy. You may hit a milestone that you can't overcome. You may run into some problems. So what I will discuss now is kind of the summary of the timeline that we were talking about, and how you finish off and then you take the real test, and how to leave some official material available for contingencies, especially the official mock test. So let me just recap what we talked about. When you're preparing, first you familiarize yourself with the content, you diagnose your problems. There's a diagnostic on my platform, and then you take the first mock test, right? That is the baseline. Now maybe that first baseline is a mock test, your first mock test, or your last real test. And then you learn the concepts, you do the guide first pass, you do the guide the second pass or pass and a half, the way I explained it in the previous video. And then once you do that, after you've solved these questions through the online platform at me.com, you take the second mock test, and then you assess. Now let's talk about when things go. So assume that mock test, you saw an increase. You saw the return on the investment of time and effort that you put in. And you think, I understood what I have to do to make progress. And so what you do in this case is you can, if you want, begin to work on the extra guides. So basically what you have is the big GMAT official guide. You have 6 mock tests, 2 of them are free and 4 that you buy. And then you have these extra guides, the verbal review guide, the quant review guide, and the data insights review guide. And then there's a bundle of questions of all types. So that you leave for later. And then you leave 2 mock tests, let's say mock tests 5 and 6 for later. Don't go through all the mock tests before you take your first real test. It's really, really very risky. And generally speaking, I do recommend to plan for taking the GMAT, the real test, at least twice. I know it's not fair, but it is what it is. So once you've done that second mock test and you think that things are going well, you use those extra guides, right? The quant review, verbal review, and data insights review. And I recommend that you only use those after you've really understood what the content is, you've really extracted all the value that you can out of the official guide, you've taken the second mock test, you've understood what worked, what didn't work, and you're going to use those guides to enhance your performance. You're going to work on efficiency and problem solving, and you're going to work on your weaknesses. And remember, you can see over here, weaknesses, they're a function of your habits. So it's going to take some effort and a lot of introspection to really reflect and look at how you're solving problems to identify places where you can improve. You can do that on your own, or you can find a tutor that can help you do that. Usually finding a tutor helps save you a lot of time because they can tell you exactly what you need to look at instead of you just looking through a needle in a haystack. So the goal of these guides, right, these extra guides, is to work on efficiency, right? Not to learn things. Here you're in the optimization phase. That's ideally what you want to do. And a lot of students come to me where they've exhausted all the material, they've solved all the problems, but they didn't really use them wisely. So that is a problem that is very difficult to deal with, but there are ways to do that. Ideally, you don't want to waste the resources. You want to extract all the value that you can out of them before you move on to the next ones. Now, once you've done that, mock test number 3, and if you feel like, again, you've made some progress, sometimes it doesn't happen, which is it's normal. It's really difficult to make progress. And if you feel like you're taking these mock tests and you see no progress, talk to someone. They can help you. Now, if you're close, book the test. Maybe book it for 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. And then what I do recommend is that you repeat the medium plus hard problems, all of them that you've done under time conditions. Now you may say, but wait a minute, I've already done them, but I guarantee you, if you do them again, now when you're at this phase over here, some time has passed since you've done them, and I guarantee you that you will have forgotten a lot of them. Even the ones that you didn't forget, you may look at it and then you may either not remember what the answer was, or you may know what the correct answer is, but you're gonna think, wait a minute, I've done this once or twice already, I still don't know what to do. That is normal. So you're gonna use this to repeat those problems again, and that is going to be valuable, I promise you. Then, if you want, this is optional, take mock test 4, right? Take mock test 4 just to really lock in that score that you got on mock test 3. And you will be hoping that you will be close, right? Either a little higher or a similar score, maybe a little less, it's okay. The idea is that you want to see consistent performance. So mock test 1, mock test 2, like first mock test is a baseline. Mock test 2 is to assess whether what you did is working. And mock tests 3 and 4 to really push towards your target score and see stability in your performance. I do not recommend you exhaust all mock tests before your first real test. I understand that you may want to save money and sometimes you have no choice, but you really want to use those mock tests wisely. So then you take maybe a few days to rest, don't do much before your real test, and then you take your real test and then you assess. And if you've achieved your target score, that is great that you're done. And if you didn't, and that is common and it does happen, talk to someone that can help you assess what you can do next, what you did wrong, what could you do better, right? Feel free to reach out. And then if you do this, you're in a position where you still have some official material that you didn't use, that is not wasted, that you can rely on in the second part of the preparation, which I hope you don't have to do, but sometimes things don't go our way. I hope that you found this really helpful. It allowed you to understand what you need to do to prepare for the GMAT, how to go about learning concepts and balancing that with using the official resources and the mock tests. If you feel like there's a gap that you still don't understand or something's not clear, you're not really sure what to do, please feel free to reach out and let me know your questions.